And you're welcome back to the TV forum for the Citi Business Festival. Like I said before, today our topic is the changing face of the Ghanaian retail market. I have a great team today, like always, who will take us through this sector, what it means for you, the SME, how you can maneuver your way. If you want to go global, how you can do that, what the space looks like as it is today, and many other exciting discussions we'll have today. But let me introduce to you my guests for this morning, and then we'll start our conversation. We have with us Michael Koto. He's the managing partner of Confidence. Michael, welcome.
Thank you, Vivian.
And then we have Madame Grace Enimyeboah, Director of Business Banking at ABSA. Grace, welcome.
Thank you, Vivian.
And then we have Michael Harry Yamson, the Managing Partner at Ishmael Yamson and Associates. Michael, welcome.
It's a pleasure.
So I have two Michaels today. I hope I don't mix it out.
You are outvoted.
And of course, we are being joined via Zoom by Mr. Robert Amkan-Lindsay, who is a former Deputy Minister of Trade. Mr. Amkan-Lindsay, welcome as well.
Good morning and welcome.
We wish you were here and in person. We know this Zoom thing is now become a thing for all of us, but we still love the in-person people. But thank you so much for joining us as well. So we'll start the conversation, ladies and gentlemen, if you will permit me to do that. And I want, for those who are watching and they don't really understand the retail space or what it looks like, I want us to give them a good understanding of that. So I'm going to start with you, Michael. You've been doing great research about this space. The other Michael too has been doing great research about this space. And of course, Mr. Amkan-Lindsay has been in that space. And of course, Grace is one of the people who is dishing out the money properly in that space as well. So Michael, what is the retail space and what is it as it is now?
Well, there are many ways to look at what would call the retail space in Ghana. But a very simple way to understand this is to look at it across three dimensions. Okay. There's traditional retail, what we can call traditional retail, which is where the average Ghanaian shops. So your corner shop, your Makola, your KGTR, the hawkers in the streets, right? We would call this traditional retail.
So that's the open market.
It's an open market. Okay. This is where we all shop, right? Then there's the second category, which is the supermarkets. So the big supermarkets which have sprung up over the last decade. A lot of it in the big malls, so the likes of Malcolm, ShopRite, Palace, right? These are big box retail platforms that have emerged. We didn't really have the style, but in the last decade we've had a lot of them. And then there's a third category, which is online retail. And online retail, you could look at it, two main categories. There's your classic e-commerce online, so the likes of Jumia, or Amazon.
Amazon and all those,
But then there's social media.
Okay.
Instagram, Facebook, WhatsApp, which is where a lot of explosive online retailing is happening, especially in Ghana, because we've not been used to traditional e-commerce that much, right, in our market. But we found a way to repurpose social media platforms for e-commerce retailing. There's another category which is, it's almost like, you wouldn't call that classically e-commerce. So your buyer to seller marketplaces. So the likes of Gigi, Tonaton, which are platforms that
are they not I thought you usually put them under the e-commerce.
They're under e-commerce, but they are a sub-component because these are places that connect buyers and sellers. It's not an integrated e-commerce platform. So you can display your product, somebody finds it, they want to buy it, the two of you on your own, right? The platform doesn't have any liabilities, they don't have payment solutions integrated, they don't do delivery. As opposed to a classic e-commerce platform like Jumia, right? Payment solutions are normally integrated, delivery is integrated, Haptel, Glovo, if you order food, right? So the e-commerce space in Ghana is playing out across these three dimensions, and there are sub dimensions to it. We've seen some really fascinating trends in each of these three segments. I'll go over some of them very quickly. In the traditional retail segment, we've witnessed a lot, we've seen a lot of resilience. So over 80% of Ghanaians, we all shop there.
That's where we all
So that's
go.
where we all shop. And even though the big supermarkets and online are taking off, they are not necessarily adversely impacting traditional retail. It's very resilient, right? Our shopping habits and everything. Two things. Number one, traditional retail is beginning to take advantage of online to extend its market reach. So a lot of people who have shops are beginning to use WhatsApp, Facebook, Instagram to begin to reach out to markets that they typically didn't have access to previously, right? So it's extending the reach of traditional retail. But we've also seen that traditional retail is beginning to recover some of the market share that they were beginning to lose to the big supermarkets.
Okay.
And the biggest driver of this trend is the recent aggressive drive by GRA to begin to tax the big supermarkets. So a lot of price-sensitive shoppers are all of a sudden beginning to go back to traditional, because that's basically a low and zero tax, retail segment. Okay, they are hardly taxed. So that's leading to, it's reinforcing the resilience of traditional retail.
So because the GRA is now trying to improve the revenue collection. And insisting on these big supermarkets, is leading to their prices going up.
It's going up.
So now people want the cheaper alternative.
They want the cheaper alternative.
But isn't that a bit, interesting, because the informal sector, the next phase for the GRA tax force is there.
Yes.
What did it go back to?
We'll see how that plays out.
Yeah.
But the tax dynamics are different.
Yeah.
They're usually, they told them they pay some toll, there's some flat rates, it's a lower rate and that sort of thing, right? So it will be interesting to see how that
they are firm with that.
The big supermarkets, the big story there is that we saw a very fierce competition that was a clash between foreign big supermarket brands, so the likes of Game, ShopRite, Citi, which came into the market. Then you had the local Ghanaian big supermarkets, Melcom, Palace, especially those two.
Okay.
In the last 2-3 years, we've seen the big foreign supermarkets pack out of the market. So Game is out, Citi is out. Whilst this is happening, the locals are expanding. So Melcom is undertaking an aggressive expansion. Palace is undertaking an aggressive expansion.
We see them opening branches all over now.
They're opening branches all over.
And then the small mini marts.
And which is the other interesting part. So what is going on is that, a supermarket like Melcom is not just upscaling, it's also downscaling at the same time, which is a very fascinating. So the mini Melcoms that we're seeing is bringing Melcom into your doorstep in the community. So Melcom is literally scaling down and opening corner shops. Now, this is an interesting dynamic that we haven't seen.
I want you to come to that because I have to bring in the others, but this is very interesting with even the scaling down and the impact on the local corner shops.
On the local corner shops,
Right. So I'll come to that. I want to bring in Mr. Yamsi because I'm looking at some data that he put up, and it's a very interesting one on what we are spending on, and of course the figures in terms of the percentage in number for the modern trade, which you said is the Palaces, the Melcoms, the ShopRite, and then the community outlets, the kiosks and all that, and of course the open market, Agbogbolushe and all that. In 2024, from what I'm seeing, 33.2 billion, and Mr. Yamsi, correct me if I'm wrong somewhere, going to the modern trade, is that the case? And then we have 11.9 billion, 36% to the community outlets, and then of course the open market, $19.9 billion. And then, Mr. Yamsi, why don't you take us through that to make us understand? Please let us know what we are spending as a country in percentage in terms of this whole retail space.
Okay, so let's start this way. Fully 2/3 and possibly up to 70% of all that we spend on in this country goes through the retail sector.
Okay.
It is arguably the most important thing that everybody associated with business, industry, the economy should be thinking about every waking moment, because the health of the retail sector is the health of the economy.
Okay.
The failure of the retail sector is the failure of the economy. In an economy where there's credit, the retail sector has credit, that powers growth and powers the whole economy. So everything that we are seeing here, we ought to be asking a very simple question about, so what's happening in retail? And what's happening in retail is that we have seen much slower growth rates. We have seen roadblocks around growth. So higher tariffs, higher taxes, more expensive supply chain costs. And so retail as a sector, for me, is something that deserves a rethink. We are spending very heavily on subsistence. Much as we see a lot of glamour in our retail sector, and Michael has talked about it, the fact remains that we spend largely to subsist. So in the data that I showed you, there's a heavy spending on just food.
Yes.
Now,
so just so I run through that interesting data.
All right.
It says we spent an individual in Ghana spends $922 every year on food, roughly.
Yes.
That is huge.
That is huge. And the next category is what we spend on our homes.
Yes, what we spend on our homes. So you're looking at the furniture, cement, everything
And
around.
then it drops to $170.
Yes, and this is, I'm looking at the figure, $170.
Yeah.
And then the third, we come to
E-commerce.
retail delivery and e-commerce, which is interesting because Michael was taking us through that. Together, we're spending over $100, 49 plus 7, over $120.
Yeah.
And then at number 4, we have clothing.
Clothing, yes.
Which
See how
is-
beautifully we are all turned out
Yes,
today.
and we're spending $91.71 on clothing every year. And then the fifth one, of course, interesting, alcohol and non-alcoholic beverages. That is over $100 as well annually. So people in clothing, food, alcohol, non-alcoholic drinks, and then, of course, e-commerce, retail, delivery. They are the big winners here.
Yeah, the big winners. But of course, like the data is showing, the gap between food, $922, and the next 170, 120, 90,
huge.
is just huge. We are simply subsisting. And that is a marker that we have to think very deeply about. When we talk about the need for industrialization, when we talk about the need for economic development, we just have to focus, if you ask me, on this one number, the gap between the spending on food and everything else.
Yeah.
And a huge part of it is staples, non-value added food.
Oh, so the
It's
cassavas
90%
and the
of that
yams.
60%, which is the open markets.
Yeah.
So that, think about it, 54% of all the retail is in basic non-value added products. That's scary stuff.
So now that takes the smile off my face
It takes
now.
the-
Because
exactly.
I was,
Because it means that all the effort in building the economy forward, in practical terms, is not going anywhere.
Yeah.
Even if the minute we begin to talk about the need for us to progress as an economy, we have to be very sober and say that if indeed half of the value that's going through the retail has no value added to it, then that's where we have to pay great attention.
Okay.
That's where we have to pay great attention. It's nice to do cars, it's nice to do computers and telephones and all of those things. But half of that value is between the farmer and the middle class person who is willing to go and pay 10 times for an imported product because it's been done well. And it can be done well here. We had a beautiful conversation about your cane bags,
My cane bag.
which I loved.
It made Grace look at me quietly.
Which I love. We had an interesting conversation about jewelry.
Yes.
And the fact that we don't have the finishing. We had an interesting conversation about clothes.
Yeah.
And even the makeup artistry that is booming.
The painters.
All these things are retail. But the issue remains, they are very low value added things that we are doing. And we have to understand that retail has the power to transform our industrial scene. Every company that made it big in Ghana making anything succeeded because they built the right relationships with the retail, with the distribution industry, the distribution and retail industry. Every company that failed because they didn't build the right linkages. I dare say those companies that packed up and left, they packed up and left because they were too dependent on what was imported. Those that have survived are finding very clever ways of shifting their shelf share towards locally made.
Local, because if you go to the Malcolms now, there's now shelves for Ghanaian products.
Thank you.
Orca is doing something similar and all that. So I think that's pretty.
So it makes so, so for me, there's this big conversation around agriculture, agribusiness. It's very relevant. If Orca is going to survive, somewhere in their store, they need to be able to say that 30-40% of what we sell has to be made in Ghana to a certain standard. So you are helping the local industry. So for me, the success of retail is the success of the economy. The success of retail is also knowledge transfer, because someone is now going to say, if Orca will give me access to the middle class, the high spending middle class, where what I sell on my own on social media, what I sell on my own on an e-platform for 400 cedis can now be marketed properly and sold for 4,000 cedis. It makes a huge difference, because now our small businesses can invest. We have not understood that retail handled well, retail shepherded well, can transform the manufacturing sector for us. And we need to be very sensitive.
Okay, we'll come to that, the expansion, the manufacturing and all that. But I want to bring in Mr. Hankan Lindsay, then great, I'll bring you in a bit to take their initial comments. Now, Mr. Hankan Lindsay, you were a Deputy Minister of Trade, so you've been there, seen it all and all that. Your initial remarks on this, our retail economy, where we are, and your initial thoughts on that.
Okay, could I go to the slide 2?
Yes, please.
If they put a slide 2. And remember, Vivian, I was also in the FMCG as VP for Coca-Cola Africa.
Yes,
so before
that's
I went there. Now, this is there's a couple of very important slides I would like to share, and the data there goes to a number of the comments that have been made. Can we see the slide 2?
Yes, please, we
Let me
can.
know when it's up. Okay, if you look at there, we have total current retail estimation of 24.24 billion as GIPC in 2020, going to 2021. Now, if you look at the 2024, I would like our viewers to look very carefully. Now, not so much the numbers, we'll come to numbers later, but the importance of the different sectors. And I think this is where we always get it wrong. The Orcas, the Malcolms, the old ShopRites only account for 4% of total retail commerce. We always get this wrong. And we spend all our time focusing on them and forget the 96%. The 96% are 36% of all retail goes through community outlets. That is the corner shops that you have. And then 60% of all our retail commerce goes through open markets. Now, we must remember this when we start talking about the retail market and the importance of which elements are. So when we start focusing too much on the 4%, we forget. We don't see the trees for the forest. So it is very, very important we look at that. The second slide I want to is just to break down this retail. If we go to slide 3, please. Break down this retail landscape a little bit for our audience and everybody else to understand. So retail is classified done here into 4 sectors.
If we can go to slide 3, please. Yes, we are on now. We're there now. Yes.
Very important. So there are 4 key sectors of retail, and this is Nielsen data that was used by many FMCG and other retailers. Apparel, so things we wear, furniture, FMCG, fast-moving consumer goods, and others such as automobile hardware, etc. And then I've further broken down the FMCG because it's one of the most important, the largest sector within the retail, into packaged foods, beverages, personal care products, household products, and low-cost household items. Can we go to 4? Because now I want to look a little bit at the numbers.
Page 4,
because
please.
that is page 4, an important factor.
Okay,
and these and I want us to remember the first thing I said, where 96% basically of all our retail does not go through the modern outlets. So if you go to page 4, I've given you some idea there. There's a lot of data there, but I want to just focus on the few. If you look at the growth projections, and then you've got the revenue as well. So if I start at the top, in 2023, projection is the apparel sector will be about $3 billion. Dollars. This is all in US dollars. If you go down a little bit, DIY and hardware stores, 5.6 billion. If you go down a bit, we talked about food being 30-something billion, etc. And then you have the various growth projections. Now, I want to state something so we're clear. It is not unusual for food to be a very large sector of the FMCG. Okay. Why? Because we have to eat. This is something that is the reality of the world we live in. So these are my opening remarks in the sense that, one, we should remember the modern trade only accounts for about 4% of the retail sector, and that 60% of everything that is sold in Ghana is sold through the open market. Let me leave it at there before we go to the next point.
Okay, before I let you get on for that one, I see that the revenue growth of all that you put on the screen, they're all dipping. Yes. Well, what is happening?
Yes. So what do you find? So remember that we're going through a period of life where things are tough. There's no other way of putting it. So you see, for instance, that the growth sector, apparel growth is going up by 3.7% cumulative growth over the period 23 expected to 27. And then you got, so it's not all going down. There are some that's going, luxury goods is going down. Probably no surprise. If things are tough, people spend less on luxury goods. Eyewear is going up, but as a percentage of the total, it's quite small. Food is going up by 9%, so it's not going down. Home and laundry care is going up. So when you tend to find, in times of difficulty, what you tend to find, people move towards the essentials. So essential being obviously food, clothes, and so forth. And then they drop on the luxury items, such as luxury watches. You see they're dropping, luxury fashion, prestige cosmetics, etc. These are dropping. That is not unusual in an environment. And we expected that over that period, between 2023 and 2027, that drop will go. But as a percentage, but the thing to remember, as a percentage of the total, these are small.
Okay. All right, let me bring you Grace. Sorry, I had to bring you last as the woman on the panel. Your initial remarks on that. You're around the financing. A lot of interesting things being said by our three guests. Your initial thoughts, sir.
So, first of all, the facts are glaring. 60% of all retailing is done in open markets. I think it's a very clear reflection of the dynamics of our economy. All right, and because of that, it's important to think through solutions that serve not just the well-organized, well-structured, but also that 60%, you know, plus the 36% on the corner shops. And in driving the growth for these sectors, obviously the retail sector is not very fixed asset heavy. It's not intense, you know, in capital. In equipment and machinery and stuff like that. So having solutions that are flexible to support their growth is important. And when we come to the funding conversation, I'll be delving deeper because, for example, from the Absa Bank perspective, we're actually able to provide 1 million cedis unsecured for such businesses to be able to scale up, you know, as well as opportunities even for backward integration as we begin to bring in the manufacturing piece of the conversation. But I think that 60% is such a phenomenal number that, you know, we can do something with.
Right. So brings us to the next stage of the industrialization then, because if you look at the 60% there, like Michael, you said earlier, there's no value addition. It's just my aunt selling her yam somewhere in, say, Mokola, my cousin selling maybe cocoa yam at Agboglushe and all that. No value addition. And that is where the action is really from there all the way to the corner shops. How do we change that? We start with Michael, then I come to Michael again, then we go around.
So we'll do Michael.
Yeah.
No, so for me, I think the value addition in retail let me tackle that before I deal with industry. I think value addition in retail begins with the adoption of technology. Technology that facilitates that process of selling, number one. Technology that makes the retail space more inviting to the consumer. So in other markets, they've researched and done so much to understand what brings you in and keeps you in. Yesterday with Bernard, I talked about the standardization that we're beginning to see in certain retail spaces.
Yeah.
Nothing says it cannot happen even in the open markets. But we have a culture that seems to fight the formalization of the open market space. But this is where local government leaders have a huge role to play in whether we succeed or we regress as an economy, to make sure that the formalization of the open markets happen. So let me go back. The adoption of technology. So how do we buy? How do we sell? How do we track sales? How do we capture data about who is buying, what they are buying, so that even in the open market, we can begin to understand better what works.
Yeah.
It is that data that then ultimately drives innovation. So what Nielsen does for the upper end, I promise you that is what marketing managers, trade marketing managers, category managers, managing directors sit down, look at, and design solutions. That fantastic product of ABSA, it does not come from nothing. It comes from a deep understanding driven by data. And where we have the least formalized data sets is in that 60%.
Yeah.
So there's a huge role to play getting technology into that 60% of the market. That's number one. Number two is the quality of people involved in retail. You go to retail when all else has failed for you academically.
Yeah.
Right? And those who have gone to the very end of where academics can take them but branch into retail, throw away all the academics. Those are the two things that happen. So if you want to be in retail, roll up your sleeves, forget all about school. But retail is a science that in many other markets, people actually master and apply. So one is technology, two is the quality of human resource that goes in there. And organizations like ABSA, I am sure that ultimately education is going to become a huge part of their success beyond now being able to put credit in the market. The credit is just the entry point. Ultimately, it's whether they can get good data driven by the quality of the people who they have given the capital to. The third thing that I will talk about, something has to shift in the way we design policy for retail. We tend to look at economic policy with the manufacturing in mind. So our taxation is very rigid. It's very one size fits all. Retail, that's 60% of the retail. Like Michael said earlier, they pay a toll in the morning and that's it. The value of trade they conduct on the table itself is not tracked, it's not captured, it's untaxed. It's untaxed. So at the end of the day, we are failing to leverage the power of retail. Someone asked me recently, how come the food sector is 30 billion and the whole retail sector is 33 billion? Something is not adding up. It's because when you enter the 60% of the market, there is a black hole of data. So we're going to have to do a lot of work to understand what goes on in that 60%. Now I can come to industrialization, because that is what will allow us to drive, industrialization domestically. The person who sells groundnuts, do we forever have to resort to blowing into a sachet to scoop? I've seen places where coconuts are harvested. They are cut to a set size, washed. A sleeve is put on them, so the coconut is now branded.
Branded, I was just going to say branded.
Something is stuck into it that allows you now to dip a straw.
Yeah.
So that 60% is not a burden. It is our greatest opportunity, as Robert said. But somebody needs to understand how to work with it, to formalize it, to upscale and upskill it, to use the data to drive innovation, and finally to make it a fair contributor to the economy. Because the truth that we all run away from is that 60% does not pay its fair share.
Over time.
So when we are struggling, it's because 60%, 65%, 70% of the economy does not pay its fair share. It's the truth. We have to accept it, and we have to find solutions. Of course, once I say things like this, everybody in retail in that 60% is screaming their head off and running for cover. But it is the truth. If you want to grow, if you want to find money in the banking sector that will go into industry, which will help them to sell higher value products and make greater profits, they have to pay their fair share.
Okay.
But it behoves on the policymaker to be nuanced and sophisticated in how you design taxation for the retail sector. Right now, it's a punishment system. Whether you go in communication, it's a punishment system. If you go into any retail sector, the way we apply taxation feels like a punishment. For those in the 4%, with all the high costs that are sitting on them, with all that they are doing for employment, with all that they are doing for technology, they are treated as if, oh, you are rich, you are serving the rich, so just come and pay. Nobody is talking about how they transfer knowledge to the 36, so that the 36 can also transfer knowledge and systems to the 60. We just have to stop looking at retail as if it is a manufacturing industry, and we have to stop treating them when it comes to taxation as if we don't know who they are. We know them because they all now carry national ID cards. Their phones are their tax numbers. Their phones are their SNIT numbers. We can formalize.
So we're ready now.
But it is an effort that has to be activated, and we are not doing it.
Okay. Michael, I'll take your quick thoughts. Second, Michael, on that.
So I'll come to the issue of industrialization, but I'll just pick on where Michael left off regarding taxation, and I'll take compliance more broadly. And what he says is very true. So a classic example is the labor market. Now, if somebody in retail or small scale, production has to formalize their operations, that means they have to do SNIT compliance. One of the challenges that a lot of small, scale producers and retailers are facing is because our regulations, especially for the labor market, for example, and I'm using that as the classic example, say that if you employ somebody beyond 6 months, you have to regularize their employment, right? You have to start paying SNIT and all of that, which is good. But what is the best practice in other parts of the world? And how can we bring some of these best practices into our market? Why can't we have regulations for people who want to work the hourly shifts? And why can't we have regulations that properly support independent contractor type employments, right? That's important. And it doesn't mean that if they don't get full-time employment, they still cannot do SNIT compliance and social security and all of that. If somebody runs the hourly shift, they should still be able to pay their social security out of that. And there are ways of going about it. And I just wanted to add that to the issue. So we need to make compliance and regulation a driver for retail, for manufacturing, for value addition and all of that. And these are just examples. But to come to value addition broadly, Vivian, you know that we do this Made in Ghana survey at Confidence. And even though Robert keeps reminding us that the supermarkets, that's a very small percentage. That's not the meat. And we completely acknowledge that. But the reason that we focus on the supermarkets is because they give us a controlled environment, right, to do a multi-year survey. And also because the supermarkets sort of give us a mirror, they mirror international competitiveness for the local products that are able to get into those, shelves, right? So that's the main reason. And we've presented insights over the years. In terms of the shelf space of Made in Ghana products, for the 3 different years that we've done this survey, we took about 20 products. You know, things like eggs, water, fruits and vegetables, spreads, beverage powder, tea, spices, sanitary products, milk and dairy products, soap and detergent, cereals, all your, you know, your regular fast-moving consumables. In 2019, when we did the first survey, only 19% of all of these products on average was made in Ghana. In 2020, when we did the survey again, across all the supermarkets, right, if you take the average number, the number jumped from 19 to 26%. In 2021, when we did the survey again, the number jumped to 31%. So we've seen an incremental improvement in the made in Ghana share on the shelves in the supermarkets. Now, I'm referencing this because there are important insights here in terms of Ghanaian products and brands, because there's a lot of value addition.
Yeah.
And if you look at the profile of made in Ghana products in the supermarkets, it reveals the efforts that local producers are putting into improving their products. We've seen product categories where made in Ghana goods have superior packaging
Yeah. Then
to
those
foreign
yeah.
products. And the question is, how do we support producers like this to scale, to expand? One of the biggest challenges we have is the issue of scalability. And you know, my pet topic that I keep talking about is the business models and the way we structure our businesses. A lot of sole proprietorships, a lot of one-person, you know, businesses. We start well, we break into markets, but how to scale then becomes a challenge because we are not willing to partner and build partnerships and strategic alliances. So there are all the policy things that need to be done by government. Cost of business has to come down. Taxes and compliance have to be made easier and should be pro-enterprise. All of those things have to be done. But the one thing that I think we need to address is that those of our business people and enterprises who have taken off well and are doing well need to learn how to come together and build strategic partnerships to make it easier to scale, to make it easier for the likes of Grace to give them loans, and all the financing facilities that they need to be able to expand production and expand market access. I think this is a very, very crucial aspect because often we talk about all the things that government needs to do, and we'll keep talking about it. But scalability doesn't just happen. To grow and scale organically is a very tough process. And all over the world, what businesses have done is to just try and go it solo. Solo scaling is tough. But scaling through strategic alliances and partnerships is important. I have said this and I'll say it again. We need a partnership of rivals in Ghanaian industry. We need to learn how to build these strategic partnerships. And it doesn't always mean that you have to merge. You can have procurement alliances. Right? Which we don't do very well. We can have strategic joint ventures, right? Production alliances. All kinds of strategic alliances that are growth.
I think maybe they think it's the merger, the equity measure and all that. So it puts them off.
Yes, so we need to broaden our horizon when it comes to these things.
Okay.
I want to add that initially we talked about retail and we talked about online. I think there's something fascinating going on in online, which is that a lot of our small-scale producers that are doing online retailing are beginning to internationalize. So the people sitting on Facebook, on Instagram, who are beginning to sell their products in export markets. So there is not just domestic retailing. We're beginning to see export retailing. And we've done a lot of case profiles of people selling beads, people selling food products, people selling clothing, who have customers and they're shipping products to them. And there's a whole underground export sector that is poorly understood. The reason this is important for boosting manufacturing and value addition is because if we mapped this underground export sector, it would reveal a lot of products, a lot of brands, which have clear potential for scaling. The reason is if you're already internationalizing as a micro producer, it tells you that you have a lot of potential competitiveness. But it comes back to the issue of scalability.
Yeah.
They're doing it small scale. They're okay because it's just a little business. But how to scale? There's a lot that needs to be done in that space, a lot of prospective brands that are emerging. They need to be studied, just like the little brands that are adding value and sitting on the shelves of the supermarkets. These are all interesting profiles that we need to study and see how they can be supported to scale, because that's how it happens. There's the big manufacturing, industries that are all over the place, and those are a lot easier to support.
Yeah,
My worry is that there's a lot of micro producers who are doing value addition.
Yeah. Yeah.
But they're not able to scale because they're just, the business strategy is just to stay small.
Yeah.
And we need to find a way to, if we can aggregate to them, if we can build more strategic alliances and partnerships, it makes it a lot easier to scale the small scale value addition that is
okay. Let me bring in Grace, because now expansion, scaling up and all that, money has to come in there. So Grace, what's available in terms of money for those who want to do the expansions for the retail area?
All right, thanks, Vivian. So before I go into what's available, I'd just like to tag on to some of Michael's submissions, because it's really what is either, working against us as a people or culturally. But for those who are able to break through out of it, it's actually working for them.
Okay.
And scalability has a number of factors. One of them is really about capacity.
Yeah.
Michael, why? Yes. Talked about the human resource there.
Yeah.
Either it's the uneducated, or if we're educated, we forget about all our education.
Yes, yes.
There is a new crop of entrepreneur on the market who's actually leveraging education and is still dealing in the open market. So how we identify them, support them, but also showcase them. So the rest of the market knows it's possible to actually do this, okay? But capacity building is so important. I mean, the corporate governance structures that these entities have that make them ready for the growth that they need to see. We've been talking a lot about basic things like bookkeeping and all that. Even though they sound so simple, they're actually important for the health measure of the business, So those are important. Yes, they are equity tools, but there are also other structures that allow you, to maintain, quote unquote, your independence, but still collaborating. And I think that's the name of the game.
Yeah.
It's really about collaboration. That's how we can become competitive. And with AFCA, and the need for us as Ghana headquartering this mission to be relevant in the program, we need to be thinking seriously about scale in our trade associations and all that, in our trade bodies. And I think the idea is there, the knowledge is there. But how we then move it to the next level where we say, okay, this is an example of a couple of businesses coming together to say, look, let's procure together. Today we do joint shipments, but it's everybody staying in the container. How about joint shipments of raw materials and having a scientific way of sharing the
cost and
the ship load instead of just the 20-foot container load, when it comes in. And all that. So I
like the way you guys are breaking down the collaborations and all that, because the conversation always around collaborations measure is the equity one. So people want to, but I like the way all three of you are saying there are different forms of collaborations, there are different forms of partnership, and perhaps that's the next level. We all need to now look at these forms.
But Vivian, let me add that the equity one, we shouldn't run away from it.
No, we shouldn't.
The challenge with the equity one is the level of accountability required.
Okay.
But if you want your business to grow beyond a certain level, you have to have that discipline. You have to build that capability. And it's not about you, the entrepreneur, doing it alone, but getting in people who will help you do it. Yes, they want to make money, but of course, it's their money they're bringing in. So you should be okay with them also making money.
In fact, let me share with you two examples from very different parts.
Michael, why? Hold on with that example. Grace, you still have to answer my question and all that. But I have to take a quick break, acknowledge my sponsors, AFSA, and all my partners and all that. Also, I'm dead meat. So this year, we're being partnered by AFSA. We're also, our sponsors are also MT and Momo. MTN Business, as well as ZPay, and we are supported by Gersel. Now, you can join the conversation. We wrap up at 12:30, so you don't have so much time. So the lines to join the conversation, 020-444-7033 on WhatsApp. You can send us a message, or you can send us a message via Twitter or Facebook by Citi 97.3 on Twitter, and then on Facebook, Citi 97.3 FM. So our number again, and we'll keep that on the screen till we finish, 020-444-7033. You can send us a message, comment. Are you in the retail business? Do you want to expand? What advice do you need from our great guest here? You can send us a message, whether it's finance, partnership, equity, whatever. We'll take those questions and give you answers. But I'll take a quick break. When we come back, we'll look at the financing and other matters arising. To stay with us, we'll be right back.
Pascal's showing his boss the efficient new technology they've installed. She is pleased, but now she's asking, why is that still there? Pascal explains that the wells can store many, many messages. The boss is not so pleased anymore. If you haven't upgraded your contact center yet, it's time to get business done better with MTN Business.
My name is Francisca Schroeder. Fobaska Enterprise is the name of my company. Fobaska deals with stationery items. The stationery business is a broad business, and it will take a lot of money. There was not enough funds to run the business. When I was a student, I was banking with Barclays, now ABSA. My personal banker just called me one day, Fobaska, can we help you? I said, okay. He came to my shop. After checking my turnover, I was entitled for some money. I will encourage other entrepreneurs to join the ABSA Young African Works program so that they can get the training and benefit from the facility so that it will take them to the next level. ABSA, Aiku, ABSA, Medase, you've taken me to the next level.
Africa is the cradle of civilization, where leaders of men, kings and queens helped build and shape the world we know today. Since the beginning of time, money and goods have moved freely across this great continent until they were interrupted by borders, arbitrary and man-made. Thanks to hard-fought freedoms, digital advancement and human ingenuity, a new day is dawning, where money and goods can once again move across these vast lands unencumbered, opening Africa up to movement, progress, and opportunity. Don't let borders limit you. Transfer and receive money quickly, easily, affordably. ZPay, building a borderless Africa.
Welcome back to the City Business Forum, the TV Forum. My name is Vivian Kailoko. I'm here with some great guys. We're talking about the Ghanaian retail market and the changing face of it. I have with me Michael Koto. He's a managing partner for Confidence. I have with me Michael Harry Yamson, managing partner Ishmael Yamson and Associates, as well as Grace Enimiabo, director of business bank in ABSA. And then we have Robert Amkan-Lindsay, former deputy trade minister as well. Now we're moving the conversation and looking at, of course, financing, whilst we're still talking about expansion and all that. And Grace will talk about the expansion bit in terms of financing.
Yes, so thank you, Vivian. I've already shared, the unsecured facility that we provide up to 1 million CDs. But also when retailers are in the growth phase, there's a significant investment in storage space or warehousing, for example. So there you can actually go into a longer term kind of funding, 24, 36 months, to procure or put up a warehouse that is environmentally friendly, future-proof, safe, of course insured as well.
Yeah.
You cover the risks around that. So that's available. But also as your trading volumes go up, you know that you need more working capital to be able to support that. So we have the overdraft solutions, which then allow you to access funding when you need it, but also be more efficient. So you don't pay for it when you're not using it. You're only incurring interest costs when you're actually using the funding. So there are ways around which we can actually support, retailers in their growth phase. Also, if a retailer is into a distribution model where they require vans for distribution, we also have an asset finance solution that allows you to actually distribute your products and your services, into the rest of the market. Now, assuming that a retailer has built so much expertise, and I'm taking you into manufacturing, Vivian, if that's okay, but you want to begin to backward integrate or begin to start or intensify your production lines as well, we have, solutions that allow you to access funding. In some of the instruments, we can actually provide a trade document, like a letter of credit for you to procure plant and machinery, which then can later turn into a loan once you have received the equipment. Your supplier is assured of his money. You, the buyer or the retailer, is also assured of the equipment that you're getting. That what you're paying for is actually what you're receiving. So there are solutions that allow us to provide flexibility for the different phases of growth, but also very importantly for me, for scaling up on the manufacturing side of things.
Okay, let's deal with the manufacturing and then of course the retail, and then how we can use finance to drive the manufacturing part and of course the retail. You have great products, hey Absa, but how can we use it to drive it to that level we are looking for?
All right. So we already talked about the approach of running the business, right? Your right structures and all that, so that you can actually come to the bank and say, this is my track record, this is the level of business I've been doing. Now, based on that, the bank can look at it and say, okay, based on the volumes you've been doing, the customer base that you've been serving, the reliability of your demand, we can actually provide you with a line. Looking at the demand that you have, you need to maybe increase your manufacturing capacity. You need another bottling line or another pellet making line or whatever, for whatever products you are producing. So based on that, we can actually work with you and even in some cases engage your supplier with you as well, of equipment and machinery, to have the conversations around what structures work best. These days, there's a lot of collaborative solutions around that allow us to give you the funding to be able to procure the equipment and actually start using them. Depending on the nature of your business, you may have one where there's a bit of lead time until production is up and running. Typically, a bank would not be giving significant funding into greenfields projects, because you have to have demonstrated that your product is actually getting market and is driving sales and revenue into your business. So once we have that record and we're giving you that funding, if it is within a certain percentage of your existing business, then your existing business can continue to pay. But if it is a new project or a new venture within your business model and needs some lead time, we actually can have a structure where we give you a facility for that project with what we call a moratorium, where over a certain number of months, you may not be required to pay anything until the project is up and running. You may be servicing interest, but you will not be paying principal, say for 6 months or for 12 months, depending on the nature of the product. And then when that is up and running as well, you can begin to meet your obligations. And I think the important thing in all of this is the fact that when it comes to paying on your obligations, you have to have that discipline to ensure that you're doing that, so that the next entrepreneur can also benefit
and not destroy for everybody and everybody lose. I like the part, pay those who go for loans and they are not paying, go and pay. But let's look at the new market channels, and this comes back to you guys and how they are redefining the consumer markets landscape. I'll start with you, Michael K.
I will come back to online. So I spoke about the internationalization of micro retail, and that's a classic example. If you look at the way the online channels are diversifying, it's still a very largely urban, type phenomenon, right? So the majority of the country, it's a different story. It's still the very traditional type channels. But I'll talk about online because I think that's where a lot of the exciting action is happening. And for business people out there, I think there is enough proof of concept that if you leverage online very effectively, you can expand your market access, not just locally, but internationally. And that's very, very important. We know a beats seller who is just selling beats, sitting at home making beats and selling beats, and was contacted by somebody in Cote d'Ivoire. And now they have they're selling their beats in shops in Cote d'Ivoire and in France, because the person that contacted them in Cote d'Ivoire also has a shop in France. That's a classic example. So the online channel is big, but it comes with some challenges which need to be fixed. One of the biggest challenges is fraud. The other one is payments. So because social media is not like your classic e-commerce platform, where at least the platform has some liability and provides some assurance in terms of payment and delivery and, you know, integrity. A lot of what's going on social media platforms for e-commerce, it's very vulnerable to fraud. If you bought something on WhatsApp and the delivery person didn't show up at your door and ran away with the product,
that's it.
Right? There's a lot of that happening. I think there's an opportunity here for the likes of Ghana Post, right? Ghana Post has been trying to reinvent itself.
So, yeah.
There's a big boom in logistics delivery, which is mostly independent delivery, you know, people who are just delivering products all over the place. So it's a very unregulated sector, but it's a very security sensitive issue.
Yeah.
Somebody showing up at your door to present a product from somebody, you bought something on WhatsApp, that's security exposure. So we need to introduce trust, you know, instruments into this whole. I think that the likes of Ghana Post have an opportunity to leverage this whole thing and reinvent themselves. What they could do, and they don't have to go buying, you know, bikes and running a whole fleet. They could run a franchise, because what is missing in the market is trust. And that whole bit. The brand Ghana Post has trust.
Yeah, it has the.
They have one of the widest networks across the country. It's almost like Ghana Commercial Bank.
Yeah, GCB.
In every town, not even major town. In every town, they have some infrastructure.
Yeah, that's true.
Right? So the likes of Ghana Post to take advantage of this. The online retail is creating a big boom in delivery logistics. But that whole delivery logistics thing is not well regulated. Right? So the likes of Ghana Post can take advantage of this. They can run a franchise model. They don't have to necessarily buy and own the bikes. They can run a franchise. Other people who own the bikes acquire a franchise. And Ghana Post can have a platform that regulates that whole space. Government needs to take this seriously so that we can improve the credibility of this new online channel, because it's not just buying the things online, it's how the thing gets to you. So that's the weak link in the whole process, and we need to deal with that. I think that how the traditional retail is utilizing online to extend its reach is very important. So there are a lot of people, and that's leading to a transformation in inventory management. So there are a lot of people now who are no longer renting a big warehouse or a big shop and stocking up, right? They display the products online. Somebody sees them, you like it, then they buy from the wholesaler that they're buying from and deliver straight to you. That reduces their cost of doing business. It improves their margins, right? So this whole online thing, it's not just about people just selling online, but it's also helping people in the traditional retail sector to extend their reach. It's leading to a big boom in entrepreneurship. Young people are creating jobs for themselves. Working class professionals are doing side gigs because they are selling online. So what's going on is not just retail. It's job creation, it's entrepreneurship, is the creation of auxiliary support industries like delivery logistics. And I think that what needs to be done to make sure that the right compliance and the right support and the right regulations are rolled out in a way that doesn't kill what is booming, but reinforces it for mutual benefit for both government, for both the regulator and the retailer. Okay,
I have to bring in Mr. Hamkan Lindsay. We're having challenges with the internet, so it seems to be going off. So I want to quickly put some few questions to him, since he his stabilities a bit so that I can come back to you guys and then. So, Mr. Ahamkamlinze, let's look at the areas where Ghanaian
Yes, I hope you can
businesses,
hear me.
yes, I
Yeah.
can hear you, can take advantage. Which areas, which product areas offer potential for Ghanaian producers?
Okay, just before I get there, I missed the discussion earlier.
Yes. Oh dear. Okay, so oh dear. We'll work that and see if we can get back to Mr. Hankan Lindsay. So I'll let Michael Y take off from Michael K.
When Michael K was speaking, the thing that dropped into my mind was DHL, which evolved out of the German Post. And again, from your submission, Grace, one of the most important ways to bring money or liquidity into a business is in the logistics management. And that brings the whole conversation about transport as a part of retail and how it's integrating with our 60%. Well, guess what? It is the VIPs that are bringing the kente from the north and Kumasi to the south.
True.
But you talked about trust and whether the goods will actually arrive. And the opportunity that it now offers branded logistics and transportation businesses also in the retail, serving another part of the retail.
Michael Y, please
Right.
hold on. We have to now give Mr. Hamkan Lims the attention so that when it goes off, we get as much. We can't lose the information. So, Mr. Hamkan Lims, we can see you if you can take.
You hear me?
Yes, we can hear you as well. So please go
Can you
ahead
hear me?
with.
Okay,
Yes.
I wanted, just to make a comment. Then I'm going to go to slide 6. But the comment I wanted to make is you asked the question earlier when the system went off. On our current retail landscape, I have actually no problem with the fact that the vast majority of our retail landscape is frankly in the hands of indigenous Ghanaians. I don't have an issue with that.
Okay.
The challenge we have is the vast majority of everything they are selling is not made in Ghana.
Oh.
That is the challenge we have. The challenge we have is not the fact that 65% or 96% of the outlets are outside. The challenge we have is that the vast majority of everything they sell is not from Ghana. Now, I want to add one more factor to it, which then looks at how is it that Ghanaian manufacturers, because the question we're asking for my Ghanaian manufacturers to get involved in the retail sector is because of the nature of the retail sector being so informal, which I believe is a point Mr. Yamson was making, the route to those markets requires different skill sets and requires different things we must do. So the formalization of that 96%, particularly the 60%, is key. Because the reality, and I want to come back to that, is that around the world, like where I'm currently in Canada, the US, Europe, wherever you are, the vast majority, of retail is through SMEs, small, medium, and micro enterprises. The problem we have is ours, small and medium, ours is micro. And so the size of it is what is making our retail landscape that more difficult for retailers to expand and also for manufacturers to get into the system. I think that is very important. I really also want to come back. With all due respect to my colleagues there talking about online shopping and the rest of it. Look, my dear friends, it depends. If your target is 4% of the population, if your target is a very high middle class that has access to online shopping, then you've got the right places. But if you are involved in FMCG and we want to build significant size businesses, then you cannot use that because the current infrastructure of our retail landscape will not give you the necessary penetration, no matter how good your goods are. We haven't even talked about services yet, but no matter how good your goods are, you will not be able to penetrate because your route to market is so small that you will not penetrate and you will still be a micro business, a problem that we continue to have as a country. So now let me go to your question. about some of the potential area. And actually, what I would do first, let me go to slide 7 before I go to slide 6, because I think we're having problems connecting through to you. Though, so the question here is, which products offer potential for Ghanaian? And this is key. And I have put there in very large letters, labor intensive. And this is very, very important. We have to understand that in our current stage of development, what is it that Ghana, and I'm not talking here about the 4%, please, I'm talking about the 96%, the majority of our industry, what is it that we can actually produce in a competitive manner to ensure that we address, first of all, our import bill, the fact that we're importing so much, and I have some numbers there I'll share in a while, and the fact that we also have a very informal route to market, so that the nature, so let me give an example. If we had 60% of our route to market is through the formalized trade, then your whole logistics chain changes. Trucks, the way you are freezer, purchasing patterns, even your go-to-market people, everything changed. When the majority of your retail outlets are open markets, you have to have a different strategy to get to it. So these are some of the products that I believe, that offer huge opportunities for Ghanaian producers, both within Ghana initially, and then as they look elsewhere. So let me give you examples. Soap and detergent, textiles and garments, wood and wood products. We talk about sugars and sugar confectionery, leather, paints and valuables, ceramic products, salt, shea and shea butter. Now, when I'm talking about these things, I'm not talking about these as a micro, a few being exported here. No. The important things what we have to do is start to understand is scale. Scale is key. Our problem in Ghana is too much of what we do is micro. It is so small that we don't build efficiencies. And when we don't build efficiencies, we don't have reductions in unit cost of price, which then means our product to market becomes more and more expensive. Then we have linked to that the fact that you have imports, cheaper imports, which have built the efficiencies, and they're coming in the system, which frankly is to our disadvantage, is where you end up in a situation where your products what is being sold in your retail outlets, a vast majority of 70% of them are not made in Ghana. Do you want me to keep going, or you want to?
Yeah, so while you keep going, because you're going on, I want you to answer as many questions as possible. So you've told us the potentials. Definitely, there are challenges that we're seeing most of these businesses facing. If you can take us through, and then finally, if you can take us through how they can penetrate. You're talking about scaling up and all that, moving to the global level and all that, and how they can do that.
Okay, so let's go to slide 8, which talks about what some of the main challenges Ghanaian producers face. Because the challenge we have here, and I want to set this up, is that we have a retail market space, which is the characteristics of it, which are highly informalized. And I'm sure Absa Bank and some of the others will talk about how you provide services to a highly informalized sector. Yeah. So the challenges I put under both products, production, and the environment. So let me just pick a few. First, under products. And this is about selection, which products manufacturers should focus on. I'm a big fan of FMCG. Why? Because the nature of it, by definition, is one of the largest chunks of our economy. It is fast moving. It allows us to build efficiencies and skill sets in going forward. Quality, complexities. The reason why I say that linked to our packaging. Some of our packaging, because especially the nature of our retail outlets are wanting. So it means that, sometimes they say when people go to market, some people market what's in the package, and some people market what is outside the package. It's important for us to remember that what is in the package is very important. Value chain distortions. Let me explain what I mean by that. Because of the nature of what we are selling and what we're going through, we often find a situation where in the value chain, Ghanaian producers cannot get themselves into the value chain in a manner where they can be part of the value chain. Let me explain it. We are trying to do, let's say, the production of tomatoes. Maybe you are able to build a tomato factory, but because you cannot get enough raw materials, which is why I'm coming later on, you end up then in a problem. Or you are not able to specialize just on one aspect of that, maybe the production of cans. maybe the supply of a tomato. So it means that our value chain becomes distorted, and therefore it makes it difficult for people to select which product. Market sizes, I've talked about that. Duplication by many. One of the things I find very challenging is that we seem to cotton onto something, then everybody starts doing the same thing.
Yeah.
Instead of spending a little bit of time looking at the analysis and building it based on that. And slow innovation. Let me talk about production. I talk here about appropriate technology. You know, this is something I always find very, very fascinating, that we must make sure that the production base that we engage in, we buy the technology, and I say buy, I don't say necessarily create. We can buy the technology today that is appropriate to the skill set of our people. And that is very, very important. I talked about skill shortages there. You know, one of the biggest areas we have, if you talk to manufacturers, is around the challenges in supervisory sectors. Raw material supplies, I need say no more. Unfair competition. What we have in dumping in many aspects, which means that people are able to sell at the marginal cost. So let me explain that. If you have a large local market and I'm making something, I can cover my fixed cost, the highest cost, through my local sales, and then I can export at the cost of the extra unit that I make. The average cost or the marginal cost, it's a marginal cost, not average cost. The marginal cost of making an extra few units, it is much lower because I've covered my fixed cost in my local market and I'm able to export that out. Low import quality, we talked about the Ghanaian taste. You know, we built a taste over the period, which sometimes it's almost as if it's designed to make sure we don't consume made in Ghana. So the retailer out there is going to take the most easiest product they can sell. It's fast moving, it doesn't clog up, there's little capital. And so it's important for us to understand in production that we understand that we must produce what the market wants, what the Ghanaian want, not what we want the Ghanaian to consume. Risk, reward imbalance, tariff structure, which sometimes makes you wonder whether we're trying to support our own or trying to support somebody else's. Environment. You know, the economic roller coaster over the past 60 years will not help anybody. You know, it is sad for me when I sit there and I realize the science of this world, the large corporates that used to be part of our system today have all gone.
Yeah.
It means that if I set up a business that I had 60 years ago, probably the only ones left are in the 4% bracket that we're talking about later. And that does not help us. Let me talk about, and I'm still on slide 8, by the way, cost of finances. This is a problem. And I'm not talking about a 1-year cycle, because the difference between the manufacturing versus the retail is that my turnover or my cycle base is not 1 or 2 months. It is probably 3 to 5 years to 10 years. And when that situation comes, I cannot make decisions that is optimal. Lack of supporting infrastructures, key. You cannot do everything yourself. So when you are engaged in that, it is important for you to realize. And here, the question I'm looking at is that what are the Ghanaian producers facing? The challenge they're facing to take advantage of the retail sector. I'm not talking here about the retail challenges. Crowding out of private sector. Frankly, over the decades, government have become business. And sometimes we need to remind them the business of government is to provide environment, and the business of business is for the businesses. And we need to constantly remind government of that, to stop getting in the way of business and allow them to grow. Because if we say they are the engine of growth, let them be the engine, not a bystander. Okay. Scattergun versus, this is one of the things I always find very, very challenging. We have so much we must do, but we have limited resources. So when you are setting up economic policy to try and engage the retail sector, we tend to do bits small of everything. And so you become jack of all trades, master of none. Yeah. And in effect, what that plays, it plays into again the import situation you find there. Okay. And then finally, if I may, I want to go to slide 6. Okay. Where you asked me to talk about the potential. The potential. And this is a very important slide because it is also linked to the AFCFTA.
Okay. If we can have the slide 6.
If we go to 6, I can see on the studio you are still in slide 8.
Okay. Yeah. All right, we have the slide 6, yes.
Okay. So what you have there in the slide is, if you take a step back, first of all, look at the absolute size of each of the boxes. So top left, you've got the malt extract. So you see there, you've got the size of that box indicates the potential for Ghana's export into Africa. So these are things we already do. If you look at it, if you still look at that, you look at the malt extract, 5% of the current potential in Africa, Ghana is effectively providing. So it means that we have 95% we can try and engage in. The same talks about palm oil on the top right in terms of the green and so forth. And what you will see there, why it is that lots of people tend to talk about agricultural product, it's not because we want to necessarily just grow more tomatoes. It's because we want to make sure we grow the tomatoes to add value to them so we get greater value and be able to sell them in our outlets and sell them both within Ghana and externally. And that is why the importance of agri-processing is. We tend to sometimes confuse agri-processing with just agriculture generally. And let me quote our old late Minister of Agriculture, Deborah, who had a quote that I really love. He said, too often we engage in gardening thinking we are actually farming. The reason why is that we must engage in actually commercial farming, not gardening. Commercial farming is a very, very different space because commercial farming links to commercial production, industrial production, and so forth. Let me rest there. I think I probably talked enough.
Yes.
For
Thank you so much.
I could add. Let me rest there.
Yes, apologies for the hitches initially, but we're about wrapping up. I'll just take a final, a question round, both to Michael K and Michael Y, on whether we should reserve some areas for our businesses, and then to you, Grace, on how producers can attract better financing to be globally competitive. I'll start with you, Grace, and I'll end with the two Michaels.
Okay, so thank you, Vivian, and it's been a very engaging conversation we've had here. But how producers can attract better financing to be globally competitive. First of all, it's really about being intentional about how they're managing their business. The governance of it is what gives the outsider a clear view of how you're running it. So financial accountability, being particular about financial reporting, and engaging your financial service providers as your partners. Okay. So being transparent with them. The second element, really, and we're talking about global competitiveness, right? The world is a global village. I think one of the biggest elements that's coming up in our modern times is really around our environmental, social management systems, right? So environmental issues, social sustainability issues, creation of jobs, employments, these are all things that matter. And where we're doing this, we need to be able to showcase it. I think we do it, but we don't showcase it enough. So we need to be able to begin to showcase these things as well, because it attracts investment. And the environmental piece, I met a company, Trashy Bags. You'd be amazed at what they're doing. And just by driving that environmental awareness, creating a change in the culture, in the minds of children, the kind of investments it's attracting is impressive. So there is opportunity out there for some of these things. Finally, I think do what you do best. Produce to the best of your ability for international standards, not just because you want to sell, but you want to build a sustainable business. Once you have a good product, you will have a good market. Once you have demand, the banks will be chasing you. So it's all about growth, really, at the end of the day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Should we be protective of some of the areas? Michael Y, and then Michael K wraps up.
Personally, I don't believe in protectionism. So I would say that there's no need to reserve. But I think that when foreign players want to enter this market, we should take advantage of that intent and enforce minimum investment and employment criteria. Okay. So let them bring money that will power the sector and power our industry. That means we must have a sliding scale requirement, minimum requirement for local sourcing. So you want to be a foreigner doing a foreign-owned retail business, we must enforce some minimum local sourcing requirements from you. Okay. Maybe start with 30% because, as Michael K said, we're already around 31% now. but it must grow to the point where we see 70% thereabouts of local produce, manufactured produce, branded produce sitting in the retail sector. So that's my view, number one, on when it comes, question of reserving. But I think beyond reserving, we also have to ask ourselves, what do we need to do to power growth? I have a huge position about inhibitors. And one of the biggest inhibitors right now for me is the e-levy. And I think that it is not something that's going to help the retail sector. It's a disincentive for consumers. And that ultimately is something that we need to think about removing. I also think about the cost of the digital platforms, the e-commerce. We have to have a conversation about capping costs. I don't see any reason why the cost of using e-platforms should be more than half of 1%. And then let that ecosystem share the value amongst themselves fairly. But we're seeing situations where the cost of using a platform, and we talk about wanting to do e-commerce in this country, and the most expensive way to trade and to buy is to use a digital platform. That doesn't work for me. Cash is now the cheapest way to do business. It's wrong. So the policymakers, the banks, the fintechs, they have to have a conversation about capping the cost of using digital systems and rather penalize cash transactions, because it is also in the cash that you have the fraud that you never will see. So we have to cap the charges to make it attractive. We have to scrap the e-levy because it is a huge disincentive, and we rather have to penalize cash transactions in the retail sector, both whether it is in the 60% in the open market or in the transport sector or the logistics and distribution infrastructure that we have. So that's me.
Well, I would say we should reserve certain aspects of the Ghanaian economy for locals. Right now we're doing it wrong because we're reserving it for retailers who are selling foreign products. If we're going to do any such protections, we should do it for made in Ghana products. And I'll take it from a national security standpoint. One of the things COVID-19 taught us, right, was it was extremely dangerous as a country to be completely dependent on imports for certain sensitive aspects of our national security as a people. So you take food, medicines, certain important industrial inputs. If something as catastrophic as a global pandemic, anything close to COVID-19 should happen again, a more severe version, and global supply chains were disrupted again, and it's a much more prolonged pandemic. It could be war, it could be anything. We saw Russia, Ukraine. It's a tragedy that a country at war like Ukraine was virtually feeding so much of the African continent. So I'll take it from a national security standpoint. I think what we should do is that as a country, we need to have a national security list of products across the board. And most of them are in retail, fast-moving consumables, and say that these products are so critical to our national survival as a people that we need to make sure that a certain percentage of these products are produced locally. So we shouldn't do it blanket across the board and say if you take this particular product, 100% of it should be produced locally, but at least 25%. And we should use public procurement as a tool to promote made in Ghana. And it has to be a policy that public procurement at a certain threshold should have a certain local content sourcing, and it has to be a policy that we should take advantage of. So I think we should do it, but we should do it for made in Ghana products, locally manufactured, value-added products.
All right, guys, our time is up, but let me read some few messages. I think I can read just one. My director is on me that my time is up. Mary Tamaklo from Butchie here in the Greater Accra region says, the retail market lacks innovation. There are companies producing for over 50 years without changing their style. Example, the chocolate industry, it lacks new ideas. We have a lot of ground nuts in the country. Why can't we produce chocolate with peanuts nuts in them. There are other ingredients like coconuts and raisins, which could be added to Ghana chocolate, so we don't have to import so many different kinds of chocolate. Thank you so much for watching us. I've been doing this today with Michael Koto, Managing Partner of Confidence. We also have Robert Ahunkan Lindsay, former Deputy Trade Minister, who joined us via Zoom. We also had Michael Harry Yamson, Managing Partner, Ishmael Yamson and Associates, and of course Grace Enimiebua, Director of Business Banking at ABSA. Our partner for this year's City Business Festival is ABSA Bank. We are sponsored by MTN Momo, MTN Business, and ZPay, and of course supported by Gersel. My name is Vivian Kai. Local The Conversation continues on radio at 9 a.m. Every day till Friday with Bernard Avle, and next week we'll be back again with the Business Forum. Thank you so much, guys, for joining us, and thank you for watching us. Goodbye.